whether you start that or not. If we have a quorum, and we have an interim town administrator.
Correct.
Interim town administrator Joe Powers here to join us tonight and get to know each other a little bit and also do some work. Okay, thanks for coming tonight on
Thank
such
you, Mr. Chairman.
short notice, and we'll help you get out because you got kids down in your office wreaking havoc.
I have 2 scholars that better be doing homework as we speak.
Good.
But thank you. Good to be here and good to connect in this manner. And I'll start out with the apologies that are necessary. Everybody got this very late. As our finance director said, she wasn't kidding. It was about 5:33.
Yes, it was. I was
Monday
talking to her.
afternoon. So, and it's been quite an endeavor. Just as background, as you may know, I came into this role late November, and so some of the timeline had been met, and we hadn't missed any deliverables. So Carol and I just jumped right in, and as I've indicated in my budget message, started right out with the department heads. About a month into the process, we knew we were fighting an uphill battle of about a $1.8 million deficit. And so with the goal of from the board of maintaining expenses to no more than 2% growth, significant cuts have been presented.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chairman, I don't know if you wanted me to go through the memo or just respond to the memo or anything else, but I know that in your booklets, after the cover page is the budget message itself that I presented to the board of selectmen Monday evening.
Okay. Well, unless you want to make a couple key points, I'll ask for people if they have any questions. So, any real key points you want to make right now?
Well, nothing beyond the memo other than it is a balanced budget. It is a budget, however, that we had to go beyond 2% to get to that level funding, the way that everything was shaking out. And you know, I've offered the department heads that March 7th is going to be an opportunity for them to make the case. I gave the assignment, if you will, during the process in January that I would ask every department head to look at their budget again if they weren't at 2% to make cuts that they thought were necessary and appropriate. I encourage them to do that in a manner of protecting the core mission of whatever their department or program was, but also providing a narrative as to how they would absorb the cuts. And I wanted to make that specifically clear that it's about absorbing the cuts. It's not taking the hit. It's not something that's easy to do. There are ramifications, and so they have worked on narrative, and that's what I think will be helpful for this committee and the board as you get into your process.
Okay, thank you.
The department heads responded exceedingly well.
Tough one.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
So, we're going to spend a little time engaging Joe. Any questions or observations or comments? Angelo?
Two very different comments.
Sure.
I fortunately had a couple hours to flip through these pages and found several things in them. It's going to take more than several hours to go through.
Sure, no doubt.
One was that in the school budget system that they presented and where they're standing today, they look to be about $1.5 million ahead of where they can be spending. And I assume that what's going to happen is that'll get carried for the next couple of months, and then all of a sudden they disappear. I was wondering if there's any way to talk to them about not doing that.
Sure.
Because that $1.5 million would be some change on it. I can't find it in that right now. So that's one area that
Sure.
I thought was.
And I do have some information regarding that I'd like to share, but if you want to get to your second question or if you'd like me to respond.
The second question was, in the case of both the DPW, the cultural center, and the rec department, the rec department has their beaches cleaned, their the John's taking care of, et cetera, lawns mowed, on and on and on. Yet, the person who pays for that is the DPW. DPW doesn't collect any of the funds that come in from the beach or whatever. And I think it would be important to put together a P&L reporting order, so you can see what the departments bring in
Sure.
and what they spend. It doesn't matter that it's charged to the DPW, that's fine. But indeed, there are a lot of things that the rec department should be looking at for the set fees or a program, and they don't have the numbers to look at. And over the last 10 years, every time we've done some sort of study of the rec department, there's several $100,000 in the hole.
Right.
So I think 3 or 4 actually, that's all. The other point is in the cultural center, I think you're adding a person, or the thought was to add a person. And in the DPW budget, there's a person being either hired or put on, doing all sorts of cleaning and staying there, and it's a whole extra body. And I just question the fact that maybe the selectmen should take a look at what's going on at the cultural center. There are 12 rooms. I was there on, I guess it was last Friday, all day. Nobody came in. I mean, there were 12 empty rooms, and then there were 4 or 5 people playing tennis.
Pickleball.
It's gotta be pickleball,
Like, yeah.
right?
And that's it. I mean, it's not a community center. What it is a low-cost rental for people who want to pay. That's fine. That's lovely, but it's kind of costly. And I think it needs to be examined.
My brief comment is part of the answer is fees and being tough on fees.
Sure.
Harwich is a lot of times shied away from upping the fees, and it's not fun to talk about that stuff. But
No doubt.
you know, if we're serious, which we are, it appears, first time in a while, I would say that fees are part of getting that right and making sure that people are paying them and that they go back into the right fund. Thank you. Okay, you had a couple other questions. You were.
No, I just would say, by the way, thank you very much for the presentation and the way you proceeded.
Yeah.
I think it's terrific. It's much better than what I've seen in the last 10 years.
And 10 years ago, you were seeing these kind of things in our report, and you know, it's nice to see something finally getting picked up in terms of tools and how approaches and so on.
If I can respond to
Yes,
the
please.
questions, but I want to build on that comment because I've been sure to always point out the work of our finance director. And I want it on the record that she's not here, she's on a well-earned vacation, but I'm still going to talk nice about her. What you see for the book is Carol's handiwork. And as I mentioned in the budget message, you know, she really took, I believe it was Objective C about transparency and getting better information. And she started moment one on that effort, and that's really come through in the book. And that's emboldened me, you know, to embrace those objectives within the overall goal number 2 of financial leadership and stability. So, to the point about the cultural center, you folks are going to know better than I, but I did have conversations, obviously with Carolyn as the budget process went through. I believe there is an overall reduction in the subsidy that's found in the capital plan, but that was Chris's recommendation. I just carried that over as well. It's my understanding that project, if you will, the cultural center experiment, is in either a midway point or a few years away from completion based on what the board's directive was to Carolyn. But it is something that we talk about in general anyway when we're talking about setting an appropriate fee structure for all of that. And to your previous points about what I would refer to, and I'm probably using the wrong phrase, but allocations or reallocations. I know when Carol and I first met in my role as acting administrator, she had advised me of the project, as we've called it, that she's been working on for you folks regarding trying to get to a true cost assessment of what I knew in a former life as program-based budgeting. You know, that you have a true understanding of the overall financial implications. And I'll be honest, it's that mindset that impacted some of my decision-making and recommendations. I think we're on a difficult position insofar as I don't think we can assume that our revenue-generating departments are at a one-for-one or a cost recovery, or that our costs are being met. They're not when you factor in pension, utilities, all of those indirect costs that we understand in the private sector, but don't have the opportunity or haven't had the opportunity in the public sector to really account for. And I think that's what the exercise that she's been doing to some degree, because that's really going to give us a truer understanding of the costs. Because we're not at cost recovery, we're not at full revenue coverage for the revenue departments. And to me, that's what I refer to as a structural or systemic concern. The good news is you folks were obviously onto it, Carol's working at it, and it's something that I'm mindful of too, and it's what she's trying to get to in this book. So those are critical points to bring up, and I'm hopeful that as we get into the discussions on March 7th, that sort of discussion does take place, because it is a systemic situation.
I think the other part of this topic is, are there sacred cows? Because historically there have been, and they've thwarted a lot of the kind of work that people are bringing forward to the table now.
Yeah, and that's a phrase I tried to stay away from during the process, but it's an apt description. However, there was a conscious decision that with the budget cuts, what I did, and I'm going to tell you that it was a very rudimentary exercise, and it's not necessarily what finance people would do, but mercifully I'm not a finance person. I'm an administrator.
Neither am I.
But I simply did what town meetings will probably do, and take the warrant article page for the budgets and went straight down the line, and anyone that was over 2% circled it. And there are some budgets that are still in there that are over 2%, and we can speak to those, because those are really a combination of other funding sources or capital or free cash. So when you back those out, those departments that seemingly weren't cut are at the 2%. But those departments that were beyond the 2%, I simply did basic arithmetic and said, this looks like the number we need to get to. And when I say it was a rudimentary exercise, I looked at it for expenses, simply because I understand that our salary and wages, by and large, have been fairly bargained and negotiated. Now, that's not to say that we can't cut them, because everything is subject to appropriation. But that's a more emotional conversation than expenses. Yeah. So we did look at the expenses to do that, and it was as simple as going down the line. I say simple, but certainly not easy, and not without it's pitfalls and concerns. And then to go back to your first point or question about the schools, I had a conversation with the superintendent for the Monomoy district a week ago, because we have received some good news from Cape Cod Municipal Health Group that our plan rates were level funded. Now that's good news for the town of Harwich, that's also good news for Cape Cod Tech, and good news for Monomoy. So Carol reached out to the business managers at their respective schools. Now I will tell you that Cape Cod Tech is obviously in a much better position for us because of the reduction in enrollment. So their cut was made through our students not going there, or our kids not being students there, I should say. And that's not the same case, obviously, with Monomoy, but I think Scott would tell you that we had a frank discussion, and I told him that the budget I was dealing with was, I think, difficult, and I know the board was focused on excess and deficiencies. I know the board's going to focus on that when the schools come before you in March. But I did ask him, and was there any room for improvement or room to move on their savings and health costs? And I will say that he can't speak for his school committee, just like I can't speak for my board. And they did have their budget meeting on the 11th. I haven't heard back yet, but whatever they saw as additional savings, they were looking to go towards curriculum. So I did advise him that I think we're going to have a broader, deeper conversation. Because as you all know, and I was present at town meeting as a employee to be. I was 2 weeks away from starting here, but we all lived through it, and we all know that we can't try to live through that again. And so we need to have those tough conversations now, and we need to make sure we vetted everything now. So I am hopeful that the school district can take a stronger look and see if there are offsets that they can offer, because I don't think we're there yet.
Let's, John,
Yes,
you have a couple of things?
A couple of things, is right. On the school committee, Joe, I did go to the meeting on Tuesday night, and Dan Torre also. And their health costs came in pretty much what yours is, 0 too. I thought I had the paper with me, but they've reduced some of their budget than what you probably had with Scott a week ago.
Yeah.
But it obviously needs more fine tuning there on the school budget. And I just want to echo Angela's thing and Jack's things, that this is a great way of presenting information, not only to us, but any of these town folks out there that may be listening or want to pick up this budget thing. It's pretty straightforward as by department of what their funding source is for that department and what their expenditures are for that department. It's pretty, no one has to really be a finance guy to do that. If you can balance a checkbook, I think you can figure this out.
Absolutely right.
And I think that's a great thing. And to your point, I want to actually echo it also. Carol's been a tremendous personal help to me. I've been in there probably more times than she wants me in there, but every time I go in there, she's open arms. It's all your department heads.
I'm going to have John lease her time.
But I just want to
We'll give a
echo,
charge back.
but it's a great step in the right direction for this town as far as financial responsibility and accounting. It's a tremendous step forward.
I can say thank you, because it wasn't me, it was Carol, but what I do want to build off of that is, that's the concerted effort, or the conscious effort, as we go into town meeting, that we've heard them. We understand their desire and the need for transparency and better information. And you're absolutely right, you know, Carol found several different sources, and I think the way she's formatted and what she's landed on is really going to pay dividends, if you'll pardon the expression, in May.
No, I speak to Donna in the assessor's department, Amy up in the treasury's department. I picked kind of key things, and this budget is so thick. I didn't have a chance to go through it all either, but I would like to hit some of the key points, mostly probably to your memo to the selectmen and us on Monday night. I'll start off with the direct impact of reductions in budget. You mentioned that the following departments bore additional reductions to achieve a balanced budget. And you go to list about 10 different departments there. Were those reductions, were they born, probably a combination of through expensing and through personnel? And I did start reading the little, so I brought magnifying glasses with me to read those things. I did see some of the expenses, and we'll just let that go for now. But I'm interested in the reduction or your hiring freeze, which I think is a tremendous good step too. Doesn't hurt to have a hiring freeze in just to evaluate with what our personnels are doing. And my understanding, Joe, we have 6 people retiring this year, at least.
Correct. At
roughly, maybe.
Yeah. And across operations and across the gamut of level and grade and salary, sure.
Yeah, and, I realize probably the number one is the fire chief. That'd be a tough one to freeze. I fully accept that. The town planner, but at least 4 more that you don't have to get into now.
Right.
But if you can briefly say where those headcounts were, in which department, and are we looking at not only a hiring freeze, but when we go to backfill that position, not necessarily move it up, just a person automatically steps into that role, that we look from outside, and I'm a true believer in promoting within, but now is a great opportunity to look at that through attrition, through headcount. Do we even need the position anymore? I don't know that.
John?
So if you want to go on that.
One thing I'd ask you as the new guy in town is be sensitive to the fact that our people here in the town gave up raises for several years, and I was amazed they did it for as long as they did it, because it was not an easy thing to do.
Sure.
So that's in their head and in their life plan. So, when somebody is hurting, the answer is yeah, they're probably hurting.
Sure. And that's a fair point. And the discussion on the hiring freeze is actually much broader than that. The first reason for it was quite simply as we were going through the budget, and depending upon the decisions that are made, there may be one or two individuals that would be impacted by layoff.
Yeah.
And so the thought occurred to me, I'm quite simply do unto others. I know how I would feel if my job were on the line, and at the same time, we're actively engaged in looking for hires that are already funded, that are in the budget for fiscal year 20, and are within the fiscal year 21 budget before you in large part. A hiring freeze was an opportunity to say, hold on for a second now. If we're this much impacted on fiscal year 21, what is the effect of filling the positions that have not yet been advertised? Now, I had to pick a point in time to initiate that, and quite simply it was based on the last advertising that was done with Chronicle. So anything that had met that threshold, so there was a position at the Cultural Center. And to your earlier question, my understanding is it's not an add to staff, it's filling a vacancy that had been budgeted previously. We had someone in there, but they went elsewhere. But not that it's an add to staff. Van driver's another one, support staff supervisor and administration. There's one or two more that were advertised, but it's really just an opportunity to say, let's pump the brakes for a second. Let's see where the discussion takes us over the next several weeks. It's the hiring freeze was not an effort to balance the budget. It was more of a mindset of, if we're doing these cuts and we're having this discussion, let's not just willy-nilly fill positions. I'm hopeful that the freeze will be lifted at some point in time once we have a better understanding on the budget. But again, it was recognizing that if certain decisions are made, there are going to be individuals that have layoffs, or departments that have layoffs that impact individuals. If that's the case, there may be attrition. There may be opportunities and bumping rights for those individuals that we wouldn't otherwise have if we filled all the positions now. So there's a stratagem there, but it's also to belie the fact of we need to be looking at everything.
John, did you have another one, or I'll move on?
Yeah, I could go on.
We're going to be doing this again.
Another big one is I saw that you postponed or cut out the I guess it's contract 3 of phase 2 for the septic, I think 1.4.
Right, so it's certainly contract 3, phase 2. And if you're in my office and you look on the whiteboard, I've got dates of the proposed special town meeting in the fall, the special election in the fall if we have it. But next to it are 3 letters that say BMT, and that's an acronym for buy more time, to be quite blunt about it. I don't believe we would prevail for debt exclusions in May for the $8.5 million for phase 2 contract 3. And I don't think we'd prevail for the $1.5 million that's proposed for design work for DHY. And I think that's quite simply because the message I heard from town meeting last year was slow down, take a better look at things. And so what we're actively doing is we're working on different funding scenarios. We're building off of work that was done by, I think, folks in this room on wastewater, I'm not calling it right, but wastewater study committee. In other words, things that have been vetted in the past that may still be relevant now. And so, again, it's a stratagem, but my thinking was, if we don't think we're going to prevail with the debt exclusion in May, don't do the fool's errand and run into the table saw. Take your time, build a plan, and bring it back in the fall if that's where we want to go. And I'm mindful of that because I know there are about 200 households in East Harwich that are, left hanging out there on that contract 3. We can all armchair quarterback what happened in May, and I can tell you it was my second day on the job when we opened the bids and we found out that contract 1 was much higher than we expected it to be. So whatever decisions that were made from there, the decisions were made.
Yeah.
But I think it would be foolhardy to go straight forward into May with debt exclusions that I don't think would prevail. Perhaps if we've demonstrated to town meeting that we've established a discipline and that we're trying to be more mindful, maybe we buy some goodwill and then have a more cogent plan for September. So not pulled, but delayed.
I do want to get some other people in, so take one more.
I'll finish up. I got a whole list here.
I'm sure you do.
On the sewer, we'll finish up on the sewer. From my understanding, the first drop of sewage is supposed to start flowing in fall, this fall. Is that correct?
What we expect in the fall, we had a meeting the other day about this, we expect that Robert B. Hour, so Phase 2, Contract 1, should be complete sometime in mid to late fall of this year, so that we then have to initiate notice to all of the folks that'll be on the system. And we got clarification that it's not going to be when we test the system or the pump stations, but once there's actually flow, then we're on the hook for the fixed rate and the flow variable. So that is something that Carol worked with Dan Pelletier, our wastewater superintendent, and that was added. That's in, and when you look at that sheet where she has reductions, we've also added that for that purpose. And I want to tip my cap to our wastewater superintendent because he has been banging the drum on that, and he's absolutely right. So the time is coming, but we are now accounting for it, and I think we can take a little bit of a breath of relief that we have that in place now.
And just to follow up, Dan's another one. He's like Carol. I mean, I've been to Dan a number of times, so he's public information. But with that being said, it starts flowing in September. Where do we stand?
Well, the flow may not start in September.
Excuse me, in the fall.
It may be, November, December,
But once it starts flowing, who's going to manage it? Where do we stand as far as the septic commission? And I know you budgeted about $250,000 or something for it. Are we going to hire our own septic crew?
Well, the regulatory body will be the Board of Selectmen acting as the wastewater commissioners, as they did the other night in the vote. What Dan has identified is he's looking at different options for contract operations. I don't want to go too far into that, but tell you that he's been partnering with Chatham and talking to Weston and Sampson about options that are out there. But Dan is actively working on this for just that reason.
And I knew he was. I'm just curious the dollar amount involved in that.
We don't have a comfort level yet. I know that he was working today with the engineer on some funding scenarios, but it's been ramped up, and it's one of the things we're working on presently.
Okay. And again, your department heads have all been very forthcoming.
Thank you.
And they really are, yeah.
Well, that
I'm
was
back
the
more
comment.
than once, too.
Yeah, that was the comment I was hoping to build off of, Mr. Chairman. I apologize, however long I've been talking. It's been far too long for me to not have stopped and said, we absolutely have a great team.
We do.
And the team is, the board, administration, straight on through, our department heads. We've got some great subject matter experts in the area that they do, but they're also great department heads. They take their budgeting responsibilities very seriously, they take their personnel responsibilities very seriously, and that's very comforting. We have a great team, and it took me too long to say that, so I apologize.
I guess
I'll
I want to
quote-
get
I'll
out.
Thank you, absolutely. You're
Dale?
absolutely
General
right.
public, we have a great town department.
Absolutely.
Dale, will you take some airtime?
Yeah, thank you. There's a lot of information
Yes, there
to digest here.
And it's organized well.
It's very well organized. I mean, I can
And
turn to
it's
any page.
It's using 2010 technology. Bar charts.
They're
Finally got to the bar charts.
they're easy to understand.
Rid of the pie charts, got pie charts.
I don't have any
pie
specific
charts.
questions at the moment, but
Okay.
I'm sure as I start to read through this.
Borrow some of mine.
How about you, Mr. Sherry?
I'd like to just readdress a little bit what John was talking about, because that was hitting me too, because I'm looking at between, on your objective B, the 8.4 million and the 1.5 million, we're talking like $10 million. And we're not gonna include that in this year's budget, according to this.
So
We're
we're
gonna
not-
push that off.
Yeah, we're not.
How long
including
can we
May.
push it off for is my question.
Well, I think that's why we need to look at the fall very seriously. The earlier discussion was if we didn't proceed in May, were we going to wait till next May? And I think that's far too long. So the mindset right now is we're not doing it in May of 2020, but we will be discussing it in the fall of 2020 if that's the will of the board. But my point on that is I don't see how we can go much beyond that. Now, there's one factor that's actually helping us in all of this, and that is, even if we were to get a solid number and go out to bid on contract 3 right now, I don't know if it is correct to say literally, but there's very little room for a third contract to be struck out there in the roadways. In other words, we've got Robert B. Hour for contract 1, we've got RJV for contract 2, and we've got Robert B. Hour doing the Chatham work. So that alone, that's going to progress through the fall and beyond that for RJV. So we don't have the space for the third contract to take place yet. So that's why I think we can hold off in May. I do think we want to have a concerted discussion and effort about it for the fall, because I don't think we want to go much beyond that.
We
Is
don't
that
want.
another,
Oh,
excuse me,
Go ahead.
sorry. Is that another way of saying that we've not had a big benefit from this amazing weather this fall?
No, that, I will tell you that. I did ask the question, so it seemed to me like Robert B. Hour was ahead of schedule. I think Abby and the crew might be angry at me for suggesting that. They're right on schedule, despite some of the depths that they were dealing with and some unforeseen things, but they appear to be, knocking on wood, that the weather continues right on schedule where they expect.
So we didn't get a lot of help from the weather.
Correct, and I think that was because of the offsets of deep manholes and everything
Yeah.
else.
Okay, thank you. Tom?
But on your, just going back to your buy more time scenario here,
Yeah.
is there, what is the buy more time? How far can we go? Do we have to go in October? Do we need to go in the fall? Can we push it into January, February next year?
We could. I'll be honest, as a former town clerk, I was deferring to my former colleague and now my government colleague, Anita Doucette, mindful of, she's got a busy election cycle in the fall anyway. So for several reasons, we wouldn't want to do a town meeting beyond October, because now you're encroaching upon presidential election and everything else. It's a different voter pool, it's a different mindset, and it changes the way that we could write our ballot if we piggybacked, if you will. I hadn't gone beyond thinking January, February, because quite honestly, I wasn't sure, a town that I worked in before, that if you ever suggested doing a town meeting or a town election in the fall, that's because the winter, it's because you were waiting for the snowbirds to go away and then you were going to sneak something through. So I didn't want to suggest any of that. But what we're doing is we're not taking a break on the planning and the work. We're actively working on checking out the funding scenarios, making sure we have a better understanding with DHY. We've got meetings every week. I've got one tomorrow, every month, and we've got one tomorrow, where we're all looking at, the three towns are looking at the phasing that we want to do. So now we have a better understanding that where we thought we might have had to do 3 or 4 phases, we may only have to do the plant design in 2 phases beyond that in the initial period. So that sort of changes the outlook, and it changes the conversation. But what we're actively doing presently is staff is working on the operations questions that we were talking about with Pleasant Bay and East Harwich work, but also, okay, there's a better way for us to perhaps address funding questions. And we're learning from our partners in Dennis and Yarmouth and what they've been doing. So it's really, we're buying more time from May to September, but we're using all of that time to perhaps answer the question in September.
Okay.
Okay.
So beyond that, I don't have a comfort level to even say whether or not we could go that far out.
I do have a quick
Dale.
question, now that you've said that. So we're cooperating with our neighbors to the east and the west on this operation, and they're moving ahead, I assume, on their own timetable. Are we in a position where we can decide when or to delay or not to delay, or do we need to be in lockstep with their progress too?
Excellent question, and we did vet that with specifically with Chatham. So because of the work that's the substantial work that's being done in contracts 1 and 2, it's not going to have any impact. We don't believe it's going to have a severe impact on the amount of flow that's produced. And so for Chatham, they wouldn't have a concern necessarily, because whether it's one customer or one drop, we're on the hook for the fixed rate. So for them, they're going to get their payment, if you will. It's more that we know we'll have enough on the system so that we can factor in the variable flow and figure out the proper rates at the time. And then the remainder of that contract, we do have the ability to determine when we want to do it, because we're already doing flow, we're already doing fixed flow payments. So on that end, we can do that. On DHY, it's more of a question of, really, what we all agreed to is that the most important question on DHY is whether the 3 towns are going to adopt the agreement or the partnership agreement. And that is going forward in the spring. What I like about that is it's simply a question of governance. I'm not suggesting that we're not talking about the money. The money will certainly be part and parcel. It's in the explanation itself. But why would we commit design money through a debt exclusion if we don't know yet if all 3 towns have committed? So the focus right now for May for DHY is the warrant article that talks about, shall the town of Harwich engage in this partnership? And so that's where all 3 towns have a shared focus. And I think all three towns are comfortable with the way that we're proceeding with design work, financing options. So,
Thank you.
John, you got a question?
No. Again,
Angelo!
I have a lot more questions, but
Yeah.
I think I'll save.
Yeah, that's good, because we're gonna have plenty of time, seriously. Angelo?
I've got a comment. It's interesting that you went to this town meeting, last town meeting. We don't have all of our town meetings like that, but it brought up a couple of really good points. Our people, our residents, really have never had an opportunity to deeply understand our budget or to deeply understand the individual departments. And we hand out a book at the meeting that shows each department and the numbers that are accounted for by that book for each department. They are worthless because they don't have things like benefits and medical. They don't have anything the other departments are doing for them. So our people just don't understand because they've never been told what the departments cost. Jack and I, about 10 years ago, were on a committee,
Yeah.
10 years ago?
Yeah.
Where, with a dozen other guys, and we looked at all of our departments and all the issues, and about 50 different recommendations came through. And probably half of them were brought forward.
We made 55 recommendations.
No, I said 50. But, and about half of them have come true, but there's still others that have not been done. Jack, do you have a copy of that?
I do, I have several, but not with me.
But we can show that to you, because I don't think there's a lot of changes, and it might be helpful.
Sure, absolutely.
We didn't find a lot of big problems, but we did find the cash box in the water operation that served as a petty cash. You know, just a little cigar box.
Yeah.
He says, you really ought to deal with that one. Yeah, it was funny. Yeah, okay. I got several comments, and this comes obviously from my background, which is not dissimilar from Angelo and Dan and Dale probably in some respects too. We're trying to do what most companies try to do, okay? We're trying to cut our costs without hopefully not doing much damage. And an example is the possibility of stopping the construction revenue stream. That, you know, I understand that's banded around. The last time I looked at it 3 or 4 years ago, it was a moneymaker, no doubt about it. It was a good thing. So that's one, but there are several others that are opportunities to, because one of the problems we got, those taxpayers, they don't understand all of this stuff, back to Anselo's point, but they do know that they want to pay more taxes. That'd be nice. I would too like to pay less taxes. But the reality is, you've got to have something that's going to replace some of that revenue, because everything else is not going to go away. The second thing is that I think we've got to take a harsh look at fees. And I'll use the rec department as an area where I think we need to turn up the volume on fees, particularly in places like that. I think we've got to be people-oriented and not get over excited about the fact that, you know, we may be off a little bit at the end, but it might be better to be off a few $1,000s than have something go really wrong 2 years down the path.
Sure, sure.
I've wondered whether we can do anything to spread out the project a little bit more, and, you know, the water project, if that has any value at this point in time or not, whether it would even be feasible. But by spreading out, you might make the burden a little bit lighter. Okay? And Noreen will tell me I'm right or wrong. I'll wait for her to tell me I'm wrong.
I understand that. I suffer that same condition.
The three things that we've got to convince the voters the Yarmouth, Dennis, and Chatham and Harwich. It would be a shame not to pass that, and, because it's gonna have to get made up some other way, which is something that I don't think people have really been hearing in the town meetings. There's no free lunch on this stuff.
Right.
This is a $100 million operation, and I don't think we're acknowledging that enough. And that's enough for now. I'm stopping, John. Okay, unless you have something else, we should let this man go play with his kids.
Yep.
Okay.
Well, thank you all very much. Like I said, I appreciate the opportunity to begin. And as I said to somebody earlier, they said, congratulations on getting the budget out there. And I said, that was the end of the beginning.
Yeah, really.
And you know that better than I do. So thank you very much. I
Thank you.
appreciate
Have
the
a good
time.
time with your kids.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Joe. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you, Joe.
There's one thing I didn't understand here. Free cash is proposed to support the purchase of a new police vehicle, as well as some technology needs. It's like, I don't understand. It's on page 8, page
Yeah,
5.
One vehicle's being funded through free cash, the other is being through a capital within the police budget itself.
Okay.
That's what I believe. I saw that too, and I questioned the same
Yeah,
thing.
I got a big circle around it.
Yeah.
And on page 4, there's something that says payment in lieu of tax pilot is the acronym for that. What happens to the money that comes in through the pilot program? I couldn't find
It's treated as revenue, and if I don't remember what page this is on, but I think it was a total of about $55,000.
Okay.
And it's treated as local receipts almost. It's a revenue source.
So that's the one on page 2? Second.
I can't remember where I saw it.
I already
But I
heard.
do remember that, and I do remember the number of about $50,000.
Okay. I'll have to follow up on that.
It's fairly, yeah, right there. It's on page,
2.
Oh, that was actually, yeah, it mentions the pilot, but then it's mentioned somewhere else, the number.
Okay.
61.
There you go.
Page 61. A lot of pages.
Oh, yeah. 55,000.
Was it 55?
Yep.
It's not that good. I remember reading it. I remember-
Good memory.
I
Right.
didn't know what page it was on, but I knew it was $55,000, so.
One thing on page 7 that I had asked this couple of selectmen and predecessor to Joe here, the reserve fund hasn't been touched in several years. We've been fortunate this year, we've not had anything other than the tornado. We've been fortunate that we haven't spent that all right away early, and I think we ought to be, not this year because we're already too far down, but I think we need to keep that one on the agenda for next year. See if we can get a little bit more on setback. And it's more important because we don't have the stabilization money. John?
On the reserve fund, didn't we make a reserve transfer?
We've made one for the tornado.
But didn't we make one to the pet cemetery too? Of $70,000
Yeah, I think you're right.
to cover the cost
Yeah.
of the expenditures made there.
Right.
And the agreement, I thought, was that we would make it back
We
through
get-
receipts from the cemetery
Yeah,
commission.
we get reimbursed.
Yeah, and I don't know if we have or what the status of that.
All right, we'll find out. I just want to quickly go through here see what things. There were some good numbers in here though, I'll tell you. Town of Harwich, existing authorized unissued proposed debt by fiscal year. Page 11, John, I know you were interested in the unissued debt when we met the other day.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
Unissued debt and as a liability.
Yeah.
As a liability of the books.
right, 'cause it's still sitting there.
Yeah, and that number is a pretty big number.
Yes,
Just so that the town folks are aware that a lot of the tax increases we all know we see now has been what the town has approved the last 10 years of finally
Right.
coming due. And if you extrapolate that out 30, 40 years, it's another $350 million. So,
Yeah.
I mean, which is proposed debt. It's
Yeah.
not pie in the sky, it's proposed debt via the wastewater project. So
yeah.
it's just a lot, it's over $500 million worth of debt. That's, ooh.
So, phrase from my past, what's the indicated action?
Is it
we
an
need to-
awareness thing?
More of awareness thing. So
Okay.
the town people know that when they go to town meeting and approve these projects, that they have to pay for them eventually. I think at town meeting, there's a general cry of just say no. No should have happened 10 years ago. It doesn't happen at that year's
Right.
town meeting.
And maybe it should,
Yeah.
okay?
No, maybe it shouldn't,
Yeah.
right.
I keep coming in on, from the side here a little
Yeah.
bit, just, we gotta think about the whole thing,
Mm-hmm.
not just, this piece of debt or that piece of debt.
And we're just advisors here. Our job is
Yeah.
to gather the facts, use our judgment, and present it to the town, and let them ultimately decide on if they want to spend the money.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's a good point, as far as the transparency goes, to let them, to make it known that,
Yeah.
we're not doing this. You did this to yourselves 5 years ago when you voted for it, and now, it's time for you, for the comeuppance, you have to pay it off.
Right.
So, somehow this has to be nicely presented to the public, that, we're paying for you because you said yes. And
Yeah, it's a tough message.
Jack made
It is.
Jack made
Trying to
a
make
good comment
nice.
Say it as
before
nicely as
Yeah.
possible.
about, checking out fees and not spending money where you don't have to, making very tough judgments, because that's the way we're gonna get some money to pay, for
Mhm.
the things that we build in the future.
Well, a couple of years ago, we adjusted the fees in the building department.
Yeah.
We raised
Right.
everything like 30%.
Yeah.
You know better, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like 30, 40%.
Yeah, and all those things get approved by the Board of Selectmen.
Yeah.
So guess what? Same problem. You turn to page 27, please.
So,
This is, I'm sorry.
just to finish off on that debt
Yeah.
issue, does that mean that as that debt is issued to pay for the future phases of the projects, that our budget will need to go up to service the debt?
It will.
Yes.
That's why we're going to be borrowing the
Right.
money.
Exactly.
Right.
The debt doesn't roll off as fast as it rolls on.
Yeah.
So the lawyers up in Boston are watching with great concern, I'm sure, to make sure we keep paying. Page 27, just looking at this is an area where I think spending some time might be useful in the future. This is measures, okay? And one of the things we said, used to say at Proctor is that tell me what you measure and I'll tell you what, you tell me what you reward and I'll tell you what you measure and how firmly you try to make the goals. So the first question I had was workload indicators for vendor payments processed. And one of the questions I would have asked my folks was, okay, you showed me this big increase in what you're saying is productivity, but what will actually be better versus that particular result? Will we save money? Or are we just doing this? Because if you improve how many vendor payments have been processed, maybe that's not the right measure, and you're going to get a lot of measurements on vendor payments that don't really
The wrong kind of behavior.
get the wrong kind of behavior, which is deadly.
Mm.
Yes. And I didn't I didn't follow why the percentage of net property tax levy collected varies from 98 to 99.5. You know, is there something systemic there, or what's going on?
Well, on that particular measurement, Jack, that's why this town has almost a $5 million uncollected property tax.
Yeah, right. And I don't
out
know.
there. And that's exactly what that is.
Yeah, and I wondered what that chart looked like versus this one.
Yeah. It's one of the highest on the Cape. I can tell you
Angela?
that.
No, he's right.
Yeah.
And then the decisions were made to allow that to happen.
It was one of the highest,
Yeah.
right.
We almost, a couple of years ago, were entertaining selling that debt.
It's been 3 or 4 years, hasn't it?
And that was pulled at the last minute by the selectmen.
Yeah.
The concern would be what you did to these people.
And the follow-up on that is basically nothing to the people.
If you go down to the assessing department, percent of abatements filed, it varies from 20 to 38 out of what? Got to be 5,000 homes that are probably showing up. 20?
I think they use 6,000, yes, yeah.
Yeah, but the population's 6,000, but the number of places filing for abatements
Oh, yeah.
versus that 6,000 homeowners, that's really low.
Very low.
Yeah.
And we have a big overlay dollar amount in that,
Yeah.
in that line item of $450,000.
And we have a lot of seniors that need help, financial help.
Yeah.
And we got to get that message out there. Okay. Keep going.
Yeah, it's a tremendous amount of work.
On page
What did-
page 37. She was on the phone Monday night, and I was talking to her from home,
Yeah,
and she was modifying this document on the fly.
it's just amazing.
Page 37, technology and channel 18 operating budget. And I guess it's also page 38. But $775,000,
36, 37.
that's on page 36,
Yeah.
774, 460. And then on the right-hand side, full-time equivalent employees is up to 4.3. We're not going to save a gobs of money by cutting things like this,
Well,
but there's a mindset issue that we got to make sure.
yeah. I saw that, and should have asked Joe that, we can follow up on that. At last year's budget cycle, we approved an assistant for Foster. Is that his first name or last name?
Foster Banford.
Okay. An assistant for him, and it was never filled.
Right, right.
He's a
And we-
one-man band. He is the IT department for the town of Harwich. I think that's a tremendous vulnerability for the town. This poor man is, he's all over. He's just one person,
Yeah,
and I think that position is cut this year.
the added position.
Yeah, I think he hasn't hired anyone yet.
Yeah, I know that, yeah.
And I think that's what that technical assistant, you see it cut, or
Yeah.
the change of one.
So you think that 4.3 is got to get funded? That's what you're saying?
I would be in favor of looking at that with Joe. I mean, again, what happens when this poor guy goes on vacation for
Or,
2 weeks?
or something else.
You know?
Mhm.
Somebody in the fire department does a good job.
Yeah, I don't know.
This one guy is our IT department?
One guy. Yeah,
Huge risk.
huge risk, I might think.
When you come in the door here, downstairs, you come in the door, open the door to the right, and there's Foster.
He's working tonight.
That's our whole IT world. And he's working down there now?
Mhm.
He was there when we came in.
And it's-
Okay, so that needs to be discussed, and
that was, I had about 25 questions for
Yeah.
Joe, and that was one of them.
that's okay, you'll get more. I don't understand, on page 38, down at the bottom of the thing, blah, 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 there is a decrease in the rec department's budget. Then it goes on to say, to decrease from a reduction in capital outlay to support White House field lighting. Capital
This is from a reduction.
outlay and lighting. Didn't we fund that from CPC last year?
No, we funded it from an emergency transfer, the lighting. They had a breakdown in the lighting
Oh, yeah.
systems,
Yes,
and they
that's
came
right.
before us,
And they asked for this
like 2
emergency
weeks
money.
before the season was gonna open, asking for $36,000.
Because remember, we had that.
And we
that was-
lectured them.
Yes.
But this year's capital request is to replace the lighting system, and a
Yeah.
warrant article for I think $450,000.
Yeah.
That's a warrant, that's the CPC money.
Well, here, they're just not going away, they're just moving it to the DPW.
It's classic. It's removing money out of the recreation department to another
Apply.
department and lower their budget for a project that is in recreation.
So Jack, is this an example of what you're talking about with fees, where they've got 81,000 in taxes and 435,000 in charge for services? Should we look at raising the charge for services?
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
You know, and I mean, my background on all this stuff is the CPC, okay? We've got all that beautiful new rec facility funded by CPC. Hopefully it'll be well taken care of. I think there ought to be fees charged. There are a lot of people using that system, that wonderful stuff. And, you know, we invested in it.
Yeah.
We've got to get them to invest in it too, in my view.
The point being with the fees, and we've had this discussion in the past, and a lot of times it gets into the board and they turn around and say, well, what's Chatham charging? It's not what they're charging. What do we need to charge to meet our cost?
Right.
And that's what we need to be looking at, not what the other towns are looking at. And too many times we fall into that trap and say, oh, well, they're charging this, so we should charge that. We need to really investigate what it costs for each department to run, and, you know, if the dump fee has to go up, or, you know, whatever, if it has to happen to make
Right.
ends meet, that's what we have to do, and charge reasonable fees for the services rendered.
I think John will agree that the pickleball players are paying their part.
No, but I think they should double the pickleball.
Mark, you got any questions or observations? Okay. I'm going to keep going through this. Healing. On page 47, in the middle of the page to the right, it says the decrease is largely due to personal cost shifts. Should be due, D-U-E,
Yeah.
to on the far right of the middle thing. I really like these.
I love bar charts,
I love
pie
them.
charts, yeah, they're great.
You just, in
So
the
much
total
easier.
quality world that I was in for a long time, you know, the basic message
TQM.
was humans are visual creatures.
Right,
And that, and you know, compare that
a list of numbers,
with that. I mean,
right, no comparison.
The more colors you can throw in, the more fun it is.
yeah. Single head value, single home family value. Page 58, is that? '59. That number had been at 350,000 for a long time. That's something to look at, is see if we can get some charting on the average home price.
What does this mean, residential value as a percent of total value? For the town?
Yeah, for the whole town. I think it's residential value, I guess, versus commercial value. Right. And
Public?
we're not a commercial town
It's,
compared to Chatham.
Right.
it supports that discussion that's held every year, or should we be charging two rates, residential rate and commercial rate? And then we really select, there isn't that much commercial.
Not gonna help.
And the commercial that there is smaller type businesses, so that they always
Construction
defer to
companies.
one flat rate of residential rate, where some towns on the Cape charge a commercial rate also, which is usually higher. So that's what that, I think, reflects their deal. Their deal.
You got something, Angela?
Sorry.
Okay. It's interesting, one thing in here, it mentions they're predicting an increase in the taxes, the hotel tax. I saw that in here somewhere.
Yeah, that's true. But this year was the first year of the Airbnb tax.
Yeah,
Which we're gonna
right.
be about 200,000.
That be on page 64, John?
I'm back to page 3,
Oh, okay.
64.
Well, I see, hotel, motel, and meal taxes, looks like
Yeah,
well, that's only 0%.
So when we meet with Carol, can
Where
we
is it?
find out, for example, on page 62, where local receipts dropped by 4%? Can we find out why?
and top of page 4, we talked earlier about the pilot thing. They're talking, I think they're talking about expecting to see some, it didn't show up on there. What else do we want to go start digging into?
I think it's very good, easily laid out in there. I think it's a good
Yeah,
late night reading for all of us. And the next meeting
Yeah,
will
it's
be
nice.
that much more forward.
right.
It's online too, if you want to jump around.
It's just a tremendous amount.
Actually, looking at it online will help, because when you see something like pilot, you want to see another reference to pilot, and find it pretty quickly.
Yeah,
Except the first reference to pilot doesn't say pilot.
Yeah, it's a lot.
So, yeah, I would, a few
you got no,
days, hours to go through this with a highlighter and write down questions.
we want to move on a little bit here. It's going to be another little bit of time before we get the warrant articles given to us by the selectmen, but it's not that far away.
Looking for the calendar.
I never find that sheet.
It's
This one.
inside of binder
Huh?
As far as the budget timeline,
No, it's the one that has the articles being proposed, so
I
warrant.
didn't see that anywhere.
It's on Monday, February 17th.
Oh, to be presented, yeah, not in
To
front
be
of us.
presented,
Yeah,
no.
yeah.
Yeah, the article to be submitted to Finance Committee by the Board of Selectmen. And they give us the final budget on the 17th. And there is discussion, you heard a little here tonight, not much. There is discussion about possible special town meeting. It's not been ruled out yet. And so that'll have to get worked on in short order if we get it from them, okay? And we're gonna be reconciling and talking to department heads. So, it's a busy time of year. I talked with Jeff today, and I said, "Are you coming tonight?" He said, "No, I'm tied up." I didn't ask him what he was tied up with. should have done that, I forgot. But I said, hey, you know, we need you. to be
Yes,
here.
very much so.
Mhm.
You're
Especially in that, yeah, this is
You're
the
wrecking
time.
my whole premise for trying to get John. Nice young man. Okay. I got anything else you want to talk?
I think CPC has voted a lot of their articles already, and most of them were approved. The one article, it seems like there's always one article that draws attention in town
Yeah.
budget, and it's not necessarily the largest article, is the, which is nothing for us really, other than be aware of it, is the playground. At the middle school, it seems to be drawing a lot of discussion. There is a private petition being, going to be on the warrant to not do anything, and not spend the money at all. So I'm just thinking that might be a topical article.
Not spend CP money at all?
Yeah,
They
on
have
the,
to.
on the playground, yeah,
Oh, on the
on the
playground.
playground, yeah.
But they approved it, and they're only ones to get to do
Yeah.
that. That petition, I don't think will work.
Yeah.
Legally.
Unless they just private petition, whatever, but that's, again, this is one, it seems like there's one article that generates a lot of
Yeah.
discussion.
Carol did throw in a lot of revenue and expense information here, Angelo. That's a favorite one of ours.
One thing that still isn't in here is the free cash raising dollars.
Mhm.
It's because you look at water department or waterways or whatever, there's money moving out of those departments and other places.
Well, have you asked Carol to look at that?
Sort of,
What do we have, 1.5 this year for free cash?
yeah.
Or roughly?
Oh, it's in here, it's not, it's lower this year.
Yes.
Right, like it, well, I'm talking about the cash percent that goes off into selectmen's desires. So I think it's
When
we
she
make the numbers for everybody, the simpler we make them.
when she gets back from her trip, why don't we sit down and talk with her about those things?
I have talked to her.
Well, it's down. Where is it? Okay. We'll talk. Got plenty of time. Huh?
We done?
Unless anybody's got something else, I think we can call it for now.
So after we've all had a chance to pour through this and come up with a list of questions, will we have an opportunity to meet with Carol and Joe and
Oh, yeah.
vet our
Yeah,
questions?
sure. Yep. Absolutely.
Especially March 7th.
Especially on March 7th, yeah.
We should do that before we.
We should do that before, yeah.
So we need to have another meeting back in a week or so.
Yeah.
And by then we probably will read 25%.
It's not a bad read. It's just, if you're, yeah.
But
You
there's
know
so
what you're
much
looking for.
Yeah,
You can't find what you read.
yeah, it's not a bad read.
So you want to individually go off and draw up your questions and then shoot them to me, so then I can have copies for things. But, you know, based on past meetings, the March 7th meeting will be a good place to ask those questions, because it's at the department manager level, which is where the money gets spent.
Mm-hmm.
So that'll be good. John, you got a look on your face.
No, I just think, yeah, I think
Okay.
that's, it's good.
And I'll trying to keep up with the agendas and the reports and the scheduling of agendas and reports. God, I wish I had Marie Hickey back. I tried to get her back, but it didn't work.
How much time can we carve out for that March 7th meeting?
It's all good.
All day. All day.
All right.
Lunch will be provided.
lunches for life. Each department head speaks about 15 to 20 minutes. And,
Sometimes just do the
After-
people.
After that meeting and sometime the next several weeks after that, we need to talk about, do we want to meet the way we're meeting this year? Or do we want us to meet only with the different department heads? So it's like our own little, that's what we used to do. Okay? And we've gotten the time crunch in the last 2 years. And then same thing this year, the time crunch was a little bit heavier. And that's what we need to talk about, whether we're doing what we want to do. All right, I think we're quit, John. Motion to adjourn, please.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Unanimous, thank you. Meeting is over.